Let's see, are we live?
Oh yeah, we are.
We are live on one of them. That's okay. We'll just stay on this one then, and I'll just share it. No, it's fine. I'll just share this one to both of those pages. Hello, good afternoon. Hope everyone's having a wonderful Saturday. We are here with our iced yerba mate.
People have been speculating these were alcoholic for some reason.
I actually think that's pretty funny. They're certainly not alcoholic.
Could have something to do with my
your behavior when
jokes.
you drink them.
I think just yeah.
Well, you're extra funny, but it's caffeinated, but it's unsweetened, and there's certainly no alcohol in it. So let me just share this to the group where that one isn't live yet. And today we are talking about how your body doesn't make mistakes, which I'm really excited for this topic today. Share. One more share and we'll be good to start. Bam! We're good to go. Hello, good afternoon. So yeah, I really wanted to talk about this one today because that's kind of like one of the core principles that I've believed for a really long time, and that learning German New Medicine has only further solidified this philosophy that I already believed, that the body is infinitely intelligent, that the body knows what it's doing, that the body has been around for a very, very long time, and that it acts on certain laws and principles in its responses and everything that it does. There's a reason. Anytime that you have a symptom, anytime anything is going on with your body, it's not arbitrary, it's not random, it's not a mistake, it's not a screw up. It is the lack of your understanding of the bigger picture, of the laws of cause and effect. And you know, it's one of those things where if you continually see an effect and you're not sure what causes it, and you're kind of just like guessing, I'm guessing that this causes it. We're guessing that germs and viruses or something wrong with the genes. We're throwing all these guesses out as to what the cause of illness is. And it's always something outside of us. Something happens and a bug gets on us, a germ, you know, our immune system is depleted, and there's something that happens that's seemingly outside of our control that determines whether or not we get sick. And the thing with GNM, and really in chiropractic philosophy as well, which is kind of the background that helped me get rooted in this idea that the body knows what it's doing, that the body is intelligent, that all of its actions are purposeful, is that recognition that there is something else going on. There is a reason when you have a symptom. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, is that you really can trust that your body is doing the right thing, but you've got to start asking better questions about why is this happening. And in GNM, it's always something going on within the mind of the individual, within the perception of the individual. Something happened in their world, and they're not making that connection. They're not making the connection between the fact they've been frustrated about a situation at work and the fact that they've had, you know, chronic digestive problems. They see those as two completely different things. They're not thinking about the fact that, you know, one of their parents left when they were young, and so they've had chronic skin issues. They're not seeing that as a connection. They're thinking it's food. They're thinking, you know, it's genes. And when you start asking these questions and you start looking for these deeper connections, you see that your body always knows what it's doing. It's always making an appropriate response to a perception that an individual is having. And so that realization, I just think, is huge. And I think that I was inspired about this yesterday as I just kind of, we went out and we were just around a lot of people. Sometimes we're kind of secluded in our little cabin. And it's just the two of us and our dog and, you know, a few people we see in the woods. But yesterday we went out and there were like a lot of people, and I was just thinking about all of these people, these individuals who have bodies and they have experiences, and they don't realize how profoundly their mental, emotional experiences, their perceptions are affecting their bodies. And the thing is in order to step into your full power, in order to truly like take control of your life and your outcomes, as every individual has the capacity to do, you kind of have to get rid of the idea of second cause, that something out there caused something to go on, and I'm just kind of helpless in the matter. When you start to see yourself as, the perceiver of everything in your world, and you start to see that, oh, this is connected. There is some reason that my body is responding the way that it is. Maybe I don't know it right now, but if I just ask myself the right series of questions, if I start looking in the right places, I will find the cause, the root cause of whatever it is that's going on.
It's interesting being out. You mentioned being around other people, and especially if you're fairly kind of aware. And I wouldn't say that awareness for me is not so much like a plane of existence that you achieve, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm aware. I'm a level 10 awareness. It's a state really that you can kind of go into or come out of. And there are certain things that we do that you can do that tend to increase the average awareness that you have. But there'll still be days when it's like anything else, like when you're really fit, or when you're really with it, or when you're really just kind of dialed in. There are these states of consciousness where you're more attuned to things, to information that maybe is always available to you, but you aren't always in a place that allows you to really receive it and to perceive it and to interpret it and to understand it, clearly. And I think yesterday it was interesting. We didn't talk about this, but I was noticing too different people's experiences. And if you walk by, gosh, I don't know how many, thousands of people maybe we walked by yesterday. It is interesting to see those experiences. She's a little bit miffed with him. We saw someone on the beach that looked like they were kind of abjectly upset about something. They were just kind of like sitting down in the middle of the sidewalk with their hands like this, and they looked like they'd gone to the beach to have fun. Something wasn't working out for them. That was interesting. Grumpy people who were in a hurry, people who were agitated, and all this different stuff. And then you think, oh, this is interesting. One, all of those are individuals with an entire universe of experience. So that's, they're not just a component of my experience. There's a sense in which I'm just a component of their experience, Now, when I switch it around like that, their experience becomes much more interesting. The fact that they're all pissed off, or the fact that they're really depressed, or the fact that they feel like they're very behind, becomes more significant when it's not just a passing blip on my radar. It's like, oh, wait, for them, that's all there is. Oh, and by the way, they're occupying a physical body, and their physical body is really sensitive to and responsive to the experience that those individuals are having. That's an interesting thing when you start coming into contact with that. And I mean, you could be so immersed in your own experience. You could be so immersed in whatever it's like to be you, that even if it's intense, after a while you can become somewhat kind of detached from it, or you can become almost somewhat oblivious to it. Sometimes, especially if it's unpleasant, some aspect of your life or some aspect of your personal experience, if you don't like it, and you're not really sure there's anything you can do about it, or maybe you don't believe that your experience matters enough to improve it, or maybe you feel like there's a lot of other things you got to do first before you have time to even think about your experience, then it's kind of an adaptive function to become sort of oblivious to or unaware of what the quality and the character of that experience is. But your body's always kind of responding to it. And it's interesting too what you mentioned about never thinking about this connection. And this is one of the things about pattern recognition, recognizing connections that exist between different things. What was the example that you gave of someone had an experience and
like a separation? So
yeah,
a parent left, when they were young, and then they've got chronic skin issues.
Yeah, no one sees that connection, or most people don't see that connection, because nothing about society, nothing about our understanding of health for the most part leads us to look there to say, oh, you're having a physical symptom, you're having a physical problem, what's going on with you emotionally, what's happening there. And because we don't even look in that corner, it's like, if I'm looking for my keys, if I'm looking for the key to the solution to my health problem, just like if I'm looking for my car keys, and I'm convinced that my car keys are in the living room. I don't know if you've ever tried to deal with someone who's like, if I am looking for something and I can't find it, I tend to it's very easy for me to get agitated and to get kind of angry and irritable and grouchy, because it just really bothers me to not be able to find something. If I'm aware, I can handle it, but if I'm just allowing myself to run on autopilot, I will default into being kind of a jerk, and then I find it and it just evaporates and goes away. But if I'm convinced that my keys are in the living room, and somebody else comes along and says, oh, have you looked in the kitchen? Have you looked in the porch and the patio area? No, I haven't looked there. I know it's not there. For a lot of people, we're looking at our diet, we're looking at our patterns of physical activity, our movement, our exercise, we're looking at our family history, we're looking at our genetics, we're looking at all these different things for the source of the problem to health issues. And we're also looking there for the keys, for the solution, But if the key is in the kitchen, And we refuse to look anywhere other than the patio or anywhere other than the living room because that's where we think it is. That's where everybody else thinks it is. This is one of those things, too, that sometimes people will say, well, listen, how can you really think there's this emotional connection or this connection between people's emotions, people's experience, and their physical health? No, the vast majority of mainstream medicine isn't talking about that. They're not looking for it. This is why they're not finding it. If there's 70 people in health and 69 of them are looking for physical causes of physical effects, well then they wouldn't find something else even if it were there. And so understanding that is a really relevant thing. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, well, everybody's in the living room looking for the key and they're not finding it. It's a lot of people's reasoning goes like this: well, but everyone's looking in the living room, so I better look in the living room too because I don't want to seem weird. I don't want to seem alternative. I don't want to seem like a quack or whatever. It's like, well, you can just be wrong with everybody else. Do you know what I mean? Or go look in another room that no one really is looking in, and maybe you'll find something. Maybe you'll find something that other people aren't finding, not because it's complicated, not because it's far-fetched, not because it's not true, not because it's hard, but because no one's looking in that space. No one's looking for an answer or for a connection there. And when you start to look, you start to find things. And then really when you find those things, you start to wonder about it. You start to say, okay, this is interesting. So there's a connection. I mean, I remember when I first when you first started talking about German medicine, the general idea to me was like, okay, I get the general connection. I mean, we are kind of an ecosystem. We're sort of it's all related in some sense. It's all connected in some way. That makes sense. But this idea that experience would cause actual serious, what we call physical diseases, that it would manifest, that basically the quality of one's experience could have extreme manifestations, consequences for their physical well-being. Well, how could that be? That wasn't immediately clear to me. But when you start to see personal connections, like we had some stuff in our relationship and fights and issues with our shoulder and all this different stuff, and you start to notice other things, people around you, and then you there starts to be a predictive power. You were talking to someone earlier today, right? Mm-hmm. And they get described symptoms to you, and you said, oh, that would be consistent with this. And they said, oh my gosh, this is literally going on in my life right now. Like, this is the problem in my life at this time. Okay, that's interesting. Then you start to say, okay, what's the biological mechanism by which this could make sense? Which is to say, this is one of these things in healthcare or in sort of medical science. If you're going to propose that one thing causes something else, in order to be taken seriously, or in order for people to kind of give credence to that, because you can't always do a trial or a research with this stuff right off, but in order for something to be considered kind of making sense, there has to be, one of the components is a biological mechanism, which is to say, if I'm going to say that your personal experience or feeling left out or feeling behind or wanting to get away from something, if I'm going to say that can cause this illness or this physical manifestation like a rash or whatever, then I have to be able to posit or propose some kind of a mechanism or a means by which the experience would influence the tissues in that way. It's not just random. It's not, there has to be some reason that it would. And for a long time, that was my major challenge. I was like, I don't understand what the adaptive advantage from a biological perspective of having my skeleton erode because I'm feeling, feeling bad about something. I don't understand why that would happen. But then when you begin to understand from a biological perspective what the purpose of individual experience is, what is the role of consciousness at the level of biology? Why is there something that it's like to be you? Think about that. That's interesting because there's nothing. You can imagine a universe in which there are creatures that exist and that reproduce and that pass on genetic material, DNA, information, and there's nothing that it's like to be them. Like, for example, there are machines, there are robots, right, that function very efficiently and do things that we have built. There's nothing that it's like to be those things. They just do their job. They just do their thing. And there's no reason that biological life couldn't be that way too. In theory, there's no necessary reason that there has to be something that it's like to be you in order for there to be you doing your thing, passing on your genetic material. And so then I started to think, well, gosh, this personal experience, what's the point of this from a biological perspective? I mean, from a human perspective, from a psychological perspective, well, the point of it is this, that is the point. My personal experience, that's the point of all of this. I mean, that's what it feels like, right? Doesn't it feel like your body is serving you so that you can go do your job and go find your lover and go make your money and go have your fun and all this different stuff? And from a human perspective, that's one point of view. But from the body's perspective, from the biological perspective, consciousness, or the fact that there's something that it's like to be you, the fact that you have the ability to perceive things, the fact that you have the ability to get angry, to get miffed, to feel left out, to feel behind, to desire things that you don't have, to feel pressure, to feel afraid, to feel frustrated. All of those experiences, you have the capacity to have those experiences because having those experiences confers some kind of a survival advantage. I felt really sensitive to that person's treatment of me, and therefore I defended myself, and there, you know, and it served me in some way. And when you start to think about it in those terms, it's like, gosh, if the experience, if my capacity to experience, if you think about the most powerful emotion you've had in the last week, if your capacity to have that emotion or to experience that thing is an outgrowth of your physical body, well, then it makes perfect sense that your physical body would respond to that emotion, to that experience in some way. That your capacity to feel jealous or to feel alone or to feel behind or to feel like you've missed the boat or feel like it's too late or to feel not good enough or whatever, that it's not superfluous, that it's not there just for the hell of it. It's not a window dressing. You can feel that because feeling that conveys some kind of information to your body about your relationship as an organism to the environment in which you are functioning, about the environment in which you're functioning. An environment which, by the way, you have to successfully navigate in order to survive and to thrive and to reproduce and do all those really important biological things. So when you understand it from that perspective, you kind of put a new filter, a new lens on it, and you start to evaluate your personal, subjective, very human, very kind of like mushy, emotional experience in a different way. If I were a physical body only, if I were biology, if I were my body, how would I be responding, interpreting to, understanding this very human psychological emotion that I'm having right now? And it's interesting, when you start to evaluate what it's like to be you from that kind of biological perspective, you start to understand it, you start to relate to it in a different way. And just as an example of something like how it just makes sense, if you're trying to understand some other person, it helps a lot to understand that person's values, right? So if like Melissa and I are having trouble communicating, there are things that are important to me, and what matters to me, what's important to me tends to influence the language that I use, the topics that I talk about, the order in which I present subjects. And that's one thing that for us for a long time was a big problem, was that we had a different sequence that we would, like, for example, I would kind of start with the solution and then describe kind of the background. You sometimes would kind of start with the problem, even if you had a solution, and work down to the solution. And my whole time, my mind trying to figure out the solution, not knowing that you had already figured it out. So if I know that, I'm going to communicate with Melissa more successfully, more smoothly, more enjoyably. I'm going to get kind of the outcomes of the communication that I want. If I don't understand that, I'm going to get frustrated. I'm going to communicate with her in ways that kind of elicits from her responses that I do not want. It works that way with your body too. When you understand your audience, when you understand to whom, when you understand the person to whom or with whom you're communicating, you communicate differently. You communicate in a way that's more consistent with getting the responses that you want. And when you begin to understand that your personal experience, especially like the strong ones, like the strong emotions, that those are communications to your body. When you recognize that's communication, you do it differently. So like if I, for example, leave my clothes laying on the floor and I don't think anything of it, I'm just in a hurry. I just exercised, I'm really excited to go out, and so I just change my clothes and leave my clothes on the floor. If I don't realize that leaving my clothes on the floor is a communication to Melissa, I will communicate unconsciously and unintentionally to her in a way that I don't intend to. To her, perhaps, and this is just made up, I don't think you really care about this, but if let's say that for Melissa, my leaving clothes on the floor is communicating to her, I don't care about you, I don't really value your space, I don't value our space, I don't really, I don't care that this bothers you. You don't matter to me. That's what I'm communicating to her. And if I don't know that's what I'm communicating to her, which is if I'm communicating that to her outside of my awareness, because in my experience, I'm just throwing stuff on the floor. In my experience, I'm just feeling mad because so-and-so got the promotion and I didn't. I'm not communicating anything to my body. What are you talking about? I don't want my body to do this, that. I don't want my thyroid doing this. I don't want my skeleton doing this. I'm just pissed off because I didn't get my promotion. Well, no. That's true, you are. But see, there's other aspects of yourself, people who are listening in. And when you realize that, you can calibrate your communication in a way that allows you to communicate the messages that you want to, and to, at the same time, avoid communicating messages that you don't want to be received.
That was so good.
Nice.
That was really, really good. Because that's such an important thing, and we tend to become very indifferent to our mental emotional experience because we think we're the only ones experiencing it. We do. We really experience ourselves like these heads in jars. You know, like we feel like it's just, oh, my private head space. No one's listening. No one cares. I can think whatever I want about myself. I can beat myself up. And we don't realize that there are biological consequences. We don't realize that we've got these trillions of cells, you know, this nervous system, and all the cells are doing, they're waiting. They're just waiting for information and signals from you because they are your faithful servants. I don't know what that noise was. They're your faithful servants, every cell in your body. They're on board for your survival. They're on board for the survival of your offspring. They're on board for you reproducing. That's what they're programmed for. And so they're like listening to you all of the time, 24/7, to say, okay, what's going on now? Like, just think about that. It's like, you know, your dog, our dog just loves us and is just waiting for us to kind of like, you know, your cells are just waiting for you to tell them things. And when you're not aware that your thoughts, your emotions, what you think about yourself is all a communication to your body, once you start to realize that, gosh, you start taking your experience so much more seriously. You take it in a new light, I guess. You start caring more about how you feel. I mean, I used to like be very indifferent to the way that I felt. You know, everything was projected outwards. Like, you got to say the right things to people, be nice, be polite, you know, make sure you get your stuff done. You know, we're so focused in the world of other people on like checking boxes and making sure you do all the right things, that you eat all the right foods, that you go to all the right places. It's all about doing, but like your internal experience isn't really discussed very much about how to feel and focus on what you want and not on what you don't want. And you know, if you're feeling bad, that is a signal to you to redirect the focus of your mind. And so now it's like we've got to work on this whole new world of the unseen. We've got to look at our own mental process and how we're experiencing ourselves in the world around us in order to modify and change what's going on with our body. And so using that, so right now your body is telling you a lot. It's telling you a lot. If you have symptoms, if there's something going on in your physical body that's outside of the norm, and you're like, why is this happening? Why is this rash here? Why does my stomach hurt? Why does my head hurt? Why am I having these physical problems? That's where you have to learn the language of the body. You've got to learn what that's communicating to you, because if someone tells me their symptoms, tells me what I have a pretty good idea with just the list of symptoms about what's going on with you. And then we kind of dig in and make the connection between the physical symptoms and the emotional experiences. That's what I do when I do consultations with people, a life history investigation. We look at everything that's been going on, we look at all of the physical stuff, and then we connect the dots. And when you see it, it's just like, oh, okay. And it starts to make so much sense. And you stop feeling like your body's attacking you, like your body has turned on you, like your body is doing something wrong. Because a lot of people, that's what they do, is they kind of get mad at their old meat suit. They're just like, my body has turned on me. You know, once I turned this age, my body started doing all this weird stuff. And, you know, I wish it wasn't happening, but there's nothing I can do. It's just age. It's just genes. It's just this. It's just that. But when you start to see that, nope, your body's not making the mistake. It's not. It's just responding. That's what it's programmed to do. That's what it's designed to do. That's how it's adapted to get to the point that it is. Like, your body has so many years of wisdom embedded within it. It knows how to respond to things, and it developed in a very different environment than the one that we're living in now, which is why, you know, like, the language of your body is very rudimentary. It's like binary. It's, are we safe or are we not safe? If it gets the not safe message from you, that means we are going to adapt. That's pressing the button that says adapt. And so realizing, what am I communicating to my body right now in this moment? Is it that I'm safe and everything's okay and that, you know, we can heal and function as normal and homeostasis? Or is it getting the message that adaptation needs to take place? And if that's the message you've been sending, you've got to become aware of these messages. And so that's that's really the big message, is how aware are you of what you're communicating to your body? Do you realize that your body is simply responding to your experience, that your symptoms are not random, they are not mistakes, they are not bugs or germs that have taken you over, they are biologically understandable adaptations to what's been going on in your life. And so when you know that, it's just like, it just changes everything. It changes the way you talk to yourself, it changes the way you experience yourself, it changes how you take care of your health. You know, you do things differently. You speak to yourself differently. When you eat food, you might eat different foods, but the way you talk to yourself in your mind when you're eating the food, you're mindful of all of that, because you realize all of that is a communication. And so that's really what I wanted to get across to everyone today. And if you're, you know, struggling with like this awareness thing, we're starting an awareness challenge tomorrow, which is kind of one of our basic programs, most basic, like number one place to start is doing the awareness challenge, because you start to have a method to kind of get this thing called your mind under control, to see what's going on with it. And we're really excited to kind of bring a bunch of new people into the awareness challenge, because it just fits so well with GNM. It fits so well with like, okay, where do I even start? So I've got these symptoms. I realize there's a communication going on here. I realize there's something about my mind and my perception that's controlling this. You know, where do I even begin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a kind of like an estrangement that kind of goes on where it's this notion that we are separate egos in a bag of skin, which is interesting. So then you got the ego, which is kind of its thing, and then it's encapsulated in a bag of skin, which is its thing, and then it's in this environment, which is strange and hostile and sometimes dangerous. And there's this kind of like pervasive estrangement when you talked about like being angry with your own body, that there's this a point of consciousness called I that lives somewhere, you know, behind the eyeballs, and that's who I really am. And I have this body. I'm not this body. I have it. Sometimes it does what I want it to do, and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't do what I want it to do, well, I've got to go talk to another ego in another bag of skin called a doctor. And what he's going to do is get his lasers out, and he's going to shoot the body, and he's going to hack at the body, and he's going to put poison into the body until the body does what it's supposed to do, because it needs to be put right here, because this body's screwing up. And it's causing me a problem, and I've got important stuff to do, you know. And there, you know, there's this. I mean, and it's perfectly understandable if especially if you're in this paradigm. But if you've been experiencing pain, if you're worried about your livelihood, if you're worried about surviving, if you're worried about leaving your friends or family members behind, if you're worried, you know, it's understandable. But there's still this kind of adversarial thing, and this is not just confined to medicine. This is how we treat other countries. This is how we treat people within this country. This is how we treat people who break laws. This is how we treat people who believe things that are different than what we believe. This is how we treat our neighbors who does things that sometimes we don't want for them to do. There's this attitude that's very sort of militaristic. There's this very kind of like confrontational, like, you know, bad stuff's out there, and you got to get your sword out and you got to kill it. You know what I'm saying? We got to rally together and smash this. We're gonna kill cancer, and let's get together and smash this disease and all this different stuff. It's very kind of warlike. I mean, that was the interesting thing. I was weird when we were in chiropractic school. There was a cancer kind of like walk, you know, and it was people getting together, and they were all going through a similar kind of hard time, family members and stuff like that. And, you know, there was an element of it that was really nice. People coming together in a community. But then they literally were marching around with candles. But to me, it was like torches. And it was like, okay, this is a torch-like, kind of like, almost like military march around this. And it was interesting, because I thought, gosh, you know, I get it. I understand it. But there's also this perspective from which, man, this seems like a very strange relationship to the physical body and to what's going on. It seems like we've sort of been indoctrinated into relating to bodily functions. No one really talks about, you know, disease or so-called disease as a bodily function. But we've got a strange relationship to the stuff that goes on inside of our own homes, biologically speaking, our house, our body. And it's interesting when you kind of start pulling that thread and you notice, how do we act in our personal relationships? How do we act in our relationships with our kind of broader community? How do we act in business? How do we act in foreign affairs, international affairs? Well, it's all pretty adversarial. How do we interact with weeds? Well, we're going to get the Roundup out and obliterate them, poison them to death. They're an inconvenience to me. Get it out of here. I don't like it. There's this, you know, us and them, me and not me, and there's this kind of like rigid, you know, and it's fascinating because, you know, we think about germs or bacteria, or we think about things growing in an out of control kind of a way. Where do you think we came from? You know, we are a manifestation of this kind of teeming pool of life. I mean, the fact that there's something that's like to be us is a result of the fact that a lot of bacteria got together and started hanging out. And then another big group of bacteria kind of got close by, and they formed a kind of loose confederation, you know. And then some other stuff came, and then it kind of got, you know, it was a broader and broader network. And then at some point along that way, this biological network becomes self-aware. It becomes aware of itself, but it also becomes aware of kind of an illusion of separateness from everything else. For some reason, I experience myself as being confined. This is really interesting to watch. A lot of people, they experience themselves as their religious affiliation, right? They're, you know, Christians, Muslims, Jews, that's a group, and then there's people who are in that group, and you're part of a body, literally a body, and there's people outside of that group. Other people, it's social things, you know, let's take it down to the individual. I am an individual. I am my mind, I am my body, I'm my spirit, right? If you're not those things, then you're not me. A lot of people are very identified with their physical body. They don't identify with their mind at all. Their ego is so preoccupied with their physical body, that's who they are. Other people are completely bound up with their sense of being or their ego. They're estranged from their body. These are people, like, very often if the body is hurting, or if the body seems to be out to get you. There's me, and I live up here, somewhere in here, and then there's this damn body that's given me so much grief and so much trouble and won't do the things that I want it to do. And there's these just increasing degrees of isolation where we become more and more estranged, more and more isolated. We feel more and more unsafe. We get more and more tense. We become more and more aggressive. We become more and more fearful. We become more and more sort of hate-driven, sort of anger-driven, because we feel so estranged and so ill at ease, because we're so much danger, because cancer wants to get you, heart attacks want to get you, strokes want to get you, those people want to get you, this group wants to, you know, there's this, and it just goes, it permeates every aspect of your existence. And when you start, though, to turn this thing around, and you start to take this kind of communication approach to things, and you start to look at it in terms of, I mean, it's so easy. Look at it in a relationship, because this is something most people can relate to. You have a disagreement with somebody. It's so easy to just decide there's something wrong with them. They're just a jerk, or in the extreme case, they're just evil. You know, that's really just a failure to explain what's going on with them. That's a failure to explain their values and your values and the manner in which those two things are interacting. You know, it's a failure to explain their style of communication and your style of communication and the way that they mixed or didn't mix. And when you have that kind of a harmonious approach to things, it's kind of like a gentle way. It's kind of like judo. It's kind of like, you know, rather than like, you know, we're going to box and we're going to pummel you down, it's that you see things coming and you embrace that momentum and you redirect it. You know, you allow things to be going in the direction they're going. So, oh, there's cancer happening in my body. Oh, there's something going on with me right now. Rather than getting out the topical creams and the you know, the cutlery and everything like that, say, oh, this is happening. This has a certain momentum to it. Rather than trying to literally reverse this thing around, rather than trying to make it impossible for my body to do what it seems to want to do for some reason, what if I just sort of take it and I sort of redirect the momentum, rather than like a hard stop like this? Because, you know, when you do this long enough, I mean, you wear out. It's like gears grinding together. But when you start to look at it and say, okay, if the body is responding to things about me, that's an interesting thing too. We think that because we don't care about our experience, that other people don't care about our experience. We think because we don't care about our experience that our body doesn't care about our experience. You know, we think our experience doesn't matter, and so it would never occur to us that, oh, you mean the body's responding to this experience? Oh, you mean my experience is a communication? Because we've been so long paying attention to behavior. Make sure you eat your broccoli. Make sure you go to school. Make sure you go to church. Make sure you don't go to these places. Make sure you don't see these people. Make sure you take care of these things. Make sure you avoid these things. It's all these behaviors. It's all these very kind of like, you got to do this stuff and you'll get an A and you'll be okay and you'll go to heaven and all this different, but we don't really pay attention to this experience. And when you sort of turn inward and you begin to value that experience, you start to become aware of really what it is like to be you is like. And you start to think about that in terms of the broader ecology of your life, your health, what's going on in your relationships, what's going on in and I mean, when you start looking at your self-concept, who am I conscious of being? You start to see everything as an expression of that internal impression. You start to really take responsibility for everything about what's going on with your body, what's going on in your relationships, what's going on in every area of your life, because there's an ecology here, and either all of it's connected or none of it's connected. And there's obviously connections between these things. And the more you recognize that, the more it's kind of like a shell that has been encapsulating and insulating this ego or this I or this awareness of being, it kind of falls away. And then you start to recognize, oh, this what it's like to be me, this experience, this fear, this anxiety, this worry, whatever it is, the sum total of what it's like to be me is actually an outgrowth of and an expression of all of the crap that this consciousness was worried about. That it's all connected, and that it's in no way sterile. It's in no way separate. It's all kind of woven together thing. And when you recognize that, you stop trying to dominate things. You stop trying to force things. You start, because when people get militant and violent, usually it's because they're afraid. And that's the militaristic language in international relationships. That's the militaristic language in health. It's the militaristic language with regards to drugs. We're going to decapitate drugs or something stupid like that. It's because we're afraid of this stuff because we don't understand what's happening. And so then we get our swords out and we just get our guns out. If you can't figure out what to do, get your guns out and just start shooting. Get your knives out and just start cutting stuff off. I mean, it's what get your knives out and start killing people. The neighbors, the country next door, cut off the parts of the body that it seems to be like that's the problem. It's the forearm that's the issue. So let's just cut it off. But when you start thinking, and you start becoming aware of the fact that the person doing the talking up here, the person who's saying, "Hey, listen, you need to kill this part, you need to cut off this part, where is that part coming from? Isn't that part coming from the same system that gave rise to this part here?" And it's an interesting thing too. When I found personally, when I don't trust other people, when I don't trust you to understand what I'm meaning when I'm saying these things to you, I will tend to do things that will prevent you from understanding. I'll tend to communicate in ways that aren't really effective, right? I have to trust you to have the good sense and to have the ability to understand this and take away from it what will be useful for you. To understand it in your own way, not even understand necessarily what I'm saying, but to extract from it something that's going to be valuable for you based on where you are in your journey. When I can trust you enough to do that, I then tend to behave in a way that is consistent with creating those outcomes. If I'm worried about Melissa misinterpreting me, if I don't trust her to understand my basic meaning, I will speak and communicate in ways that will lead to her not really getting what I really meant. And I think it's the same thing with the body. There's this basic level of trust that's necessary, because until that level of trust is there, you can't stop focusing on the body and watching the body and observing. I mean, it's like in a police state, you know what I'm saying? People are so busy watching everybody else all the time that they don't even see what they're doing. And so everybody's watching everybody else and no one's paying attention to what they're doing. And so everyone's doing a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense and doesn't serve anybody. And everyone's seeing, but everyone's watching everyone else. And so they're seeing all the bad things everyone else is doing. This is what is it? Take the speck out of your eye before, the log. And before we start talking about what's wrong with the body, let's look at what we ourselves are conscious of being. Let's observe our own personal experience. Let's just kind of trust the body to do. Let's trust the body to respond appropriately to our experience, and then let's spend, some amount of time figuring out how to improve what the quality of that experience is. I mean, Jesus, you worry so much about your body, my body, everyone's body, and you haul it to the doctor, and you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars having all this stuff done sometimes, and never is no one ever looks at their own experience, stressed, freaked out, worried, angry, feeling abandoned, feeling defensive, feeling judged, feeling not good enough, feeling fundamentally unworthy of living. And nobody looks at what's going on underneath the soil. Everyone's looking at the crops, these crops aren't any good, so let's obliterate them. Let's put some fake ones in. Let's do all this different stuff. Let's put some chemicals on them and make them look good. But no one's looking kind of underneath the soil at the experience. No one's looking at that. You know what I'm saying? Which is weird to me, because the whole point of surviving is so that we can continue to have this experience. But if the experience is dreadful, because we're so worried about not surviving, it's this kind of strange kind of mix-up thing where what it's like to be me is terrible for a number of reasons, but one of them is because I'm afraid my body's going to kill me, and my body is doing things that make me think it's trying to kill me in response to this crazy fear and anxiety that I'm experiencing. And I mean, for a lot of people, it's like even if they're not physically, if they're not having symptoms at a given moment in time, if they haven't received a diagnosis, or if maybe their diagnosis has been rescinded, been cured, they're still worried because they're watching their body. There's people who are doing, breast exams and stuff like that. There was a thing right there about, and okay, fine, I understand the intent behind that, but for a lot of people, the experiential outcome of all of this cancer awareness stuff is, I got to check my body to make sure this son of a bitch isn't trying to kill me. I've got to check my body to make sure there's not something in here yet that's going to get me, because I need to detect it early, because I know at some point my body is going to be Brutus, my body is going to be Judas. I know at some point my body is going to come up behind me with a dagger, and I've got to catch him before he can get a foothold, so that I can run to the doctor and the doctor can cut him out. And it's like, okay, you know, that there's a hostility there that, you know, if your experience matters, think about that for years and years and years and years and years, if that's the relationship that you have to your body, or if anything even approaching or approximating that is the relationship that you have to your body. What, from the perspective of an organism, what's the consequences of living like that? Just in quality of life. I mean, forget about actual illness and experience causing illness, but look at just like the quality of your life. If you're like the, you know, the secret police of a police state watching your body, like your body is the citizenry, and you're watching it to make sure it's not trying to subvert something or to take over, you know, there's a hostility there and just a kind of a splitting that is not conducive to health or well-being, and it's not conducive to having really a life that's worth living either. And so I think that just kind of like reconciling that, and recognizing some really terrible things can come from failures in communication. People kill each other, you know what I'm saying? People who otherwise could have wonderful lives together. I mean, terrible stuff can happen. Really big, severe pain, really extreme physical adaptation can occur when communication isn't working properly. You know, there's all these different stories about, you know, people go to different countries and they don't realize that, you know, if you belch in Japan, it's like, you know, it's a polite thing to do. It's like one of the classic examples. But if you go to this country and you do something that's totally innocuous here, it's a severe insult there. These are communication issues. There's communication issues between the we experience ourselves to be, this is the person up here, and the whole of who we are, kind of like the psychobiological ecology reality. And reconciling those communications is tremendous. And, you know, like a lot of people kind of in the beginning, they're incredulous, and they say, I can't believe that not feeling so depressed, I can't believe that getting over these self-worth issues would resolve this lifetime of chronic pain. And I think the reason for that is that you just don't realize how relevant and how important the experience really is. And you don't recognize what a communication that is. And you don't really understand. I mean, most fundamentally, people understand it, they know it, but they're not really aware of how important communication really is, literally in every area of life. And if you've once or twice or three times seen the horrific things that can occur as a result of miscommunication in any area of life, pick an area. I mean, I'm not talking about just health. I'm talking about international stuff, family stuff, community stuff, you know, whatever, between husbands and wives, between boyfriends and girlfriends, all this different stuff. When you've seen what can happen when communication goes wrong, and when you see what can be fixed when communication is addressed, communication rapport is reestablished, well, then it's not surprising at all that you can go from feeling like you are not going to live and you don't even want to live, even if you could, to feeling completely like you did before, as if nothing ever happened. And yeah, just opening up your mind to those possibilities, I think, is a very powerful thing.
Yeah, and so realizing that you and your body are on the same team. You know, that's the thing, is you are not opponents. You are not adversaries. You are allies. And that realization is so powerful. One of my favorite analogies for kind of understanding these physical adaptations, for something that everyone understands. Everyone understands that if you scrape your knee or if you cut your hand, there's going to be like a fleshy growth on the spot where you cut yourself. Like, that's additional cells. Those are cells that grew because you damaged tissue here, you know? And so the body builds this homemade Band-Aid. But if you keep ripping the Band-Aid off, the body is still going to keep doing what it's meant to do, but the thing is, it's because it's such a short time. We can see the direct connection between, oh, I cut my hand, I scraped my knee, and oh, now there's this extra tissue that's building and growing and filling in what was lost. But see, when it's inside, when the tissue adaptation is taking place because of a perception, because of, you know, like a separation conflict, like a female separation conflict, like a torn from my breast separation conflict, and the duct is eroding of the breast duct, and then when that program is finished, when you resolve that conflict, the body, it basically, you know, like intraductal breast cancer, you could compare it to a scab, because that's really what it is there was tissue that was eroded for a purpose, for a period of time, because of something you were mentally, emotionally experiencing, something that was being communicated to your body regarding your life experience. You felt like someone or something was violently torn from your breast. It was a shock to you. It was alarming to you. And your body's got this really basic biological program that says, oh, if she's having this experience of something being torn from her, biologically, what that's analogous to is having your baby taken from you, torn from you, baby dies, is gone, and so now the body knows, okay, we need to like siphon off this breast milk because the baby is now gone. Like that's the equivalent of that experience. And so then once that's resolved, the body just fills in the tissue, and that's what you feel is like an intraductal breast cancer when that gets diagnosed. That's what it is. It's a refilling of tissue. But we look at it and we say, oh my gosh, something's gone terribly wrong here. You've got this gene, all these women in your family have this gene, and now, you know, and you were using toxic deodorant, and then you were, you know, eating those foods, and you did all this bad stuff, and so, you know, sorry, now we've got to cut this out. We've got to take this out of your body. But if we simply recognize that the body doesn't grow extra tissue cells for no reason, you don't just grow scabs on your body if there wasn't a cut. There's a cause and effect, and it's just that we are not, and medicine doesn't recognize this bigger cause and effect. It doesn't see these other things at play. It just sees, oh, this is wrong, this shouldn't be here, we must remove this. And, you know, and then it just plants all this fear in you because you feel like there's something here that can spread off little pieces and it can go to everywhere else. And it's like, it's a terrifying story to tell yourself. The kind of standard medical understanding of cancer and metastasis, it's really terrifying. It's like, yeah, please get this thing out of me as soon as possible. But it's like, that's part of you. That's part of your body. Your body grew that for a reason. Your body built that for a reason. It built extra cells. It tore them down. It's rebuilding them now. When you realize, like, that's part of you. That is you. These tissue adaptations, they are you. They're serving this purpose of your greater survival. And so it's really, what is the effect if you didn't find earlier and let them remove a tumor? And so if you have the tumor removed, I mean, you just had the tumor removed. How are you going to respond to that? And so what you've done in the past, your emotional, mental response to it, if you think that all is lost, I did such a bad thing, you know, I had a mistake, whatever, your body's going to respond to that experience. What's done is done. Like once something happens, once it's in your past, it's like you can respond to it in any way, but the way we want you to respond to it is in a way that communicates safety. All is well. My body, you know, like I can recover from this. Your body is resilient. It still wants to survive. And so no matter what you've done, even if you've done chemo and radiation and done, you know, the whole traditional model, that's fine. It really is. I mean, at this point, all that really matters is how are you experiencing it now? What story are you telling yourself? A lot of people, once they learn kind of holistic stuff, they beat themselves up for what they did before. But that is a misunderstanding of the principle. That's like a lack of a full understanding, because if you really understood, you'd realize how important your now experience is, and you'd realize, okay, you know, that happened and that's fine, and I was responding based on what I was exposed to, what I knew. I was making the very best decisions for myself from the very best place, and that's okay. But now I'm in a new place, and now I'm going to make different decisions based on that information. And so it's kind of like, you know, you have permission to evolve. You have permission to have done something that, you know, you would have done differently now, and it's totally fine. And that's what really all of this work is about, is how do we get you to the point of realizing how totally fine everything is, how totally perfect you are, how wonderful your body is, how your body's responding exactly appropriately, and like getting to that place of peace and ease and well-being and clarity. And so that's really like all of my work. That's what it's about. It's like we've got to take everything that's happened and start to change our perception of it, because you can change the way you look at and experience pretty much anything. So let me see. I think thank you guys so much for being here today. I saw that Patricia was on and was loving it, and April. We love you guys so much. Please let us know if you have any questions. Comment below if you want to be added to or join the awareness challenge group that starts tomorrow, because that's going to be a really, really wonderful thing to participate in, to kind of help you to learn our way. You know, we've got a very particular method and way that we teach people to elevate their awareness, to kind of rewrite this communication to your body. We also have the Resolve program, which is our online membership community where we teach you all of these things specifically regarding conflicts, regarding the German New Medicine material. How do you practically take these ideas of GNM and turn them into something usable within your own life, in your own experience, in your day-to-day? Hi, Kathy. And so that's what the Resolve program is all about. It's kind of like really practical journaling exercises, guided meditations, videos for you to watch, notes for you to read, to really just immerse yourself in this really different perspective, because it is. We know it's different. We know it's weird. We know that there's kind of like, okay, now what do I do with this information now that I know how important my experience is? And so that's what our goal is in Resolve, is like, let's make this super duper practical for you to be able to make these shifts for yourself on a daily basis, because we can't do it for you. Your doctor can't, nobody can do the work for you. It's all about your own internal experience. And so you kind of have to become a master of you. And so that's what we teach you to do in there. So we love you guys. Have a great rest of your day. And we will see you if you join us in the Awareness Challenge. So have a good one.